It's becoming that season when people like to have a nice hot mug of something. And you know, what's better than a nice hot mug of mulled cider this time of year? So we're gonna make a mulled cider, but in the fermenter. We're gonna have all the spices and everything added to it. So basically all you gotta do is add a mug and some heat and you're good to go. To start, we want to start hydrating our yeast, and we're going to be using some juice. And for that, I'm using Mott's natural juice. And I want to mix this up because there's stuff at the bottom of this container that you want to use. You know, that goop, it's good. Okay. One thing of note is when you use a container like this, it is already sterilized, not just sanitized, it's sterile. So there's nothing in there. There's no risk of infection. You don't have to do anything with this juice, but we're going to anyway for a different reason. And we brought it back. The self-stirring cup. It's literally just a cup from a Magic Bullet blender, but it has little ribs inside and it helps so much with something that I'm about to do. So what I want to do is just pour a little bit of juice into here, just a couple ounces, nothing major. Then I'm going to add something that we've been playing with lately, Go Firm. And I'm just going to use 1/4 teaspoon. This is, it's a hydration medium for yeast. So it helps it to be a little stronger. It gives it some vitamins and minerals. Think of it like a Flintstones chewable for your yeast.
Speaking of yeast.
Well, before I do that, I want to mix that up a little bit. It's not going to totally dissolve, but I like to break it up a little. It says you don't have to, but you know, it just bothers me seeing clumps. And this is where the self-stirring cup comes in handy. See? It just works.
Speaking of yeast, what yeast are we using today, Bri?
Safe Cider TF6. And why are we using it?
We're using it because it brings out the fruity flavors in ciders.
I happen to have a half packet because we did a cider test just maybe a month ago. And this was one of the 3. And it actually did produce a little bit more of a fruity flavor. So we figure since we're doing a fruity juice and fruity apples, probably a good idea, right? I'm just going to dump that half packet right in there.
Don't forget to whack your packet.
Yep, there's always a couple of yeast in there that don't come out, and they won't fulfill their destiny if they're stuck inside the packet, and you paid for them, so. And then just give it a good mix. I always get some stuck to the side. It just what happens. But don't worry, because we can rinse that out, you know, and get them all in there. It's okay. Now, put that to the side. Let it get all foamy and stuff. On to the next part. Now, I already said we're going to be using apple juice, but I like to make them a little bit more, you know, just a little extra. So we have 6 apples that we're going to be adding to our 1-gallon batch. And what are we using, Derek?
But because we are going that extra little bit of extraness, we didn't just choose one type of apple. No, we have 2 different types of apples. We have Granny Smiths and we have
Honeycrisp.
Honeycrisp, thank you.
And we're using 3 of each. Now, the reason for each apple, the Honeycrisp is obviously for a little bit of sweetness in there. The Granny Smith is for some tartness because tartness makes a cider a little bit better. Now, this one's going to be highly spiced and lots of flavors going on, but it's still, you know, I like to have a little in there. Now, I'm cutting the cores out. I know that the seeds in your stomach can produce cyanide, okay? Don't get freaked out because you'd have to eat like a bushel or more of apples in order to have any issues. But to me, it's just one of those, why risk it and better safe than sorry kind of deals. So that's why I'm just gonna remove all the cores and seeds, cut them into like 8 pieces each apple and plop them into a pot. All right, so the apples are all chopped up. They're in the pot. Next, apple juice. I have 64 ounces in this container. Well, maybe 62 ounces because I poured out a couple. And I'm gonna pour it right in with the apples. You might be going, what are you doing? Well, here's the thing. I don't like to use some of the preservatives that people use for preparing fruits and things like that, like Cardamon tablets. I just don't like to use them. We used them a couple times. I didn't like the way the flavors came out. Maybe it was just what we did. I don't know. But we didn't have a good experience, okay? So I don't want to use that. So instead, we're going to pasteurize. And all I'm going to do is I added enough liquid to just barely cover these apples. I'm going to put it on the stove. And when one of the apples, I can pierce it with a thermometer, it comes to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Put the Celsius right here. I'm going to give it 1 minute, take it off the heat, let it cool. Okay, so I brought it up to temperature and maybe a little bit beyond that temperature. I think some of them were reading like 180, 190 degrees in the middle. And that's okay because we've done cooked apple cider and cooked apple wines before.
And it was delicious.
Yeah, it only helps it. It doesn't hurt. So if you cooked them a little bit longer, it's okay. The problem is they'll fall apart, which just makes cleanup a little bit more difficult. But now we're left with a lovely pot of cooked apples and apple cider. I did put it in the bathtub with a few inches of water and got it down to about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put the Celsius here. You want to get below blood temperature, okay? Which I say blood temperature because room temperature varies. But if your blood is more than a couple degrees different than mine, please see a doctor. So what I want to do now is we're going to transfer it from the pot into our fermentation bucket. And we're using the one from North Mountain Supply. We love this thing. It's semi-opaque, so you can see through it, and it has measurements in both metric and American numbers, so it makes everybody happy. But you can also see those measurements, which is wonderful. I had initially thought there's two ways to do this. There's the dangerous way, and there's the safe way. And I think I'm going to do the safe way. But something you want to do from this point forward, everything that's going to touch this must has to be sanitized in
the red bucket of sanitization.
I think you can see her over the bucket, right? So this spoon, the fermenter, all our gear, everything was sanitized, even our hands. They were all dunked in sanitizer fluid, okay? Do the best you can.
Even the apples before you cut them.
Yeah, we even dunked the apples in. Not that it mattered because they got
cooked,
boiled. Yeah, they were, I mean, some of these are falling apart. And I'm just going to scoop them all out so that I don't splash like crazy when I try to dump this in there. I mean, you can do it the dangerous way if you want to. I usually do, but I think this is going to be good and I don't want to waste any of it. It is annoying though. That's why I do it the dangerous way, because it's faster. If you watch our show, you know I have no patience. Or little patience, I should say.
You want to dump now?
I'm going to dump it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you sure?
No.
That wasn't so bad. Okay, so now on top of that, I want to put in another half gallon or 64 ounces of our juice. Gotta shake up the goop though. That's the good stuff. I joke about that, but it's actually kind of true. There's sediment, nutrients and stuff in there. There's sediment that can be nutrients in there. A little bit. Does it really matter? No, but it's funny to say it. So, okay. And you can get fancy with your pouring because oxygenation at this point is a good thing. But you want to keep it in the bucket. Yeah, when it starts splashing out of the bucket, that's too fancy. We can't have that kind of fancification around here. Okay. Not that I think it really needs it, but we're going to add a little bit of nutrient to this anyway. And doing that in the form of Fermentation from North Mountain Supply. They say a quarter teaspoon at the beginning, quarter teaspoon. I just do a half teaspoon up front. I front load. I don't worry about it. Don't get crazy on me. This probably doesn't even need this much, but it's Fermentation, so you almost can't use too much. We used to use tons of it, and we saw a slight difference, but if you're using something that has diammonium phosphate or anything like that in it, you probably want to follow the manufacturer's suggestions and only put in that much because you can actually taste that stuff. Now we mix, but not with metal inside a plastic bucket. If you mix in a plastic bucket with a metal utensil, you have a possibility of scratching the wall, and it'll never sanitize fully right after that. So plastic. For that, we're going to be using the spattle. It's a spoon, it's a paddle, it's both. You can get yours in the link in the description below. And that's right, I named it. I'm proud of it. I'm just giving this a quick mix. It's not crucial. Just want to get some of the Fermentation in there. It never seems to break apart well for me. It's an annoyance and an OCD thing more than anything. Now,
because he was adding the apple juice to this, he could have put some apple juice in a separate container and whisked the Fermentation if he really wanted to, but obviously he didn't.
Right. There's a lot of ways you can do things. It's kind of like Captain Jack Sparrow says, you have to know what you can do and what you can't do. I just did it that way. Okay, our yeast has made a little bit of a foam dome. Check that out.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so I'm going to give it a stir and dump it in. And I got most of them off the wall But this was sanitized, wasn't it?
It was, and so was this. So we can use the baster to get some of our musky
That's not what I was going to do.
Out. You're just going to
I was going to dunk it right in there. Which you can do either one. The yeast is stuck to the side. It's not coming off. Those yeast will never achieve their destiny, but it's okay because we had plenty. Just going to give that a little mix.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
It is the way.
And I'm going to mix this up. Now, because we have this handy measuring thing on the side, you can see that we're under 1.5 gallons for this batch. That's probably a good thing because I expect that this is going to get kind of active. And the fruit, it's probably a good thing that I cooked it a little bit more than I really wanted to because that'll make it sink in the liquid just a little bit better. Also, one thing that's very, very important, you want to make sure that when you pitch your yeast, your temperature is blood temperature or below. Anything above that and you start to risk hurting it. So, like I said, I cooled it down and then we just added more below blood temperature cider.
Yeah.
To cool it down even more. So I know, I can feel it. It's not even warm to the touch at this point. So we're good to go. But
Brian.
What?
I have a question.
What?
How much pectin is in apples?
Quite a bit.
Perhaps we should add...
Pectic enzyme. Not a bad idea. I'd also like to take a pH reading, just because.
Okay.
Okay, something of note as well. We just dunked this teaspoon, half teaspoon measure into turbos to clean it off because it had fermento all over it because that stuff gets a little gummy when it hits, anything with humidity. And I'm using a paper towel to clean it out. Now, before anybody freaks out and says, oh, but you just, defeated the purpose of sanitizing. No, I didn't. Paper towels, just by their very construction and nature and production qualities, are actually sanitary. So, yeah, I can do this all day long and I'm not hurting it. But if you don't get this dry, like to the molecular level,
Sure.
You're rubbing off on me.
I am.
It will stick like crazy. Yeah. So we are going to use a little bit of pectic enzyme, also known as pectinase. It's a naturally occurring enzyme that helps break down some of the fruit, and it helps break down some of the proteins and things like that, that makes the haze that you might see in cider. I don't really mind it having a haze, but,
I recently did a deep dive on pectic enzyme, and I will link that video in the description below.
Yep. And I'm going to do half teaspoon. Just put it right in there. Now I got to mix that through too. Now, it will pull a little bit more sugars out of the apples. Not enough to really worry about. We never really know how much we're going to get out of whole fruit that way. You might get all the sugars, you might get none of the sugars. But they're there for flavors, for tannins. Those skins are going to add tons of tannin, which is like your body and mouthfeel to this cider. Really, really adds a lot of complexity to it. We've been doing that whenever we make a juice cider, and it just changes everything. Next thing I want to do, though, is a pH reading. I know there's a lot of malic acid in apples, but I don't think I've ever taken a pH reading of an actual cider. So, hey, no time like the present. Why not? Now, a couple people have asked me when we're taking pH readings, we just put this into star sand, which is acidic. But if you notice, I fill it up and then I squeeze it out, and I fill it up again and I squeeze it out. Sometimes I edit that out, so people might not have seen me do that, but I do that after it's been in sanitizer, so that way I don't have that problem. And you do not want to drip it over your brew. You want to put this onto the side and off like that. Okay, I don't think it's too acidic. Oh, yes it is. Yeah, it's about 3.0.
All right.
So do we want to de-acidify?
I think just a skosh.
You know what? We're just going to use all the stuff today. I'm okay with that because this is how you learn what to do and when to do it and why you're doing it. 3.0 pH, it might still ferment. It might be just fine. We nutriented everything. There's plenty in there to work with. We even did Go Firm. But you know what? Better safe than sorry. I'd rather just add a little bit of potassium bicarbonate to bring that pH up to more like 4, which is where we like to be. Okay, like I said, this is potassium bicarbonate. You can also use potassium carbonate. You can use calcium carbonate. You can even use plain old baking soda, but be careful with baking soda because it can add a salty flavor when you use too much. For the amount we're going to use today, probably not going to be a big deal. I'm just going to use a half teaspoon. And again, got to mix.
You want to be careful when you're adding a a basic element to an acidic brew because it likes to bubble up and create that volcano experiment situation. So here we have a very wide mouth container. So the likelihood of us overflowing, particularly with that much headspace, is slim to none. But if you were in a different container with a different amount of headspace, that might be a legitimate concern.
Yeah, typical narrow carboy. Yeah, they tend to do that, especially if you're really close on headspace. All right. Oh, that's looking much better. No, it's so. I would say it's probably between 3.5 and 4, 3.7-ish or so.
Seems good to me.
I think we're good. I don't think we need to go any further. I mean, I figure people have been making cider for a long time.
They probably weren't adding
potassium bicarbonate to it, and it seemed to work out just fine.
It's all right.
But let me take some notes here. All that's left now is to get an estimate of our specific gravity. And I say estimate because the fruit, it's going to throw it off. So I'm just going to go with what we know. Because some of the juices of the fruit, some of the sugars would have come out in the cooking process too. So there's that. It's always just an estimation. But I'm expecting somewhere around like a 1.050-ish or so. And what do you know? 1.050. Now, what does that mean? That means that gives us an idea of the density of all the solids that are in there, which include sugars. So it's not 100% perfect, but it's the best we got. And I can give you a rough idea of how much alcohol we could make if this was to finish dry, which I expect it to. Ciders should finish dry pretty easily. And just using our hydrometer, which is a triple scale, if I look at 1.050 on the hydrometer and turn it to the potential alcohol side, it says about 5.5%. So that's what we're looking at, is about 5.5%.
Sounds good to me. Are you ready for the lid?
I am ready for the lid. All right, so this was obviously in turbos. She filled it up. There's a little too much in there. See, the max line is right here. It's filled a little too much. Let's just get rid of some of that. Now, is it a big deal if there's a little too much in there? No, it's just more likely to bubble out if it gets too excited. So better safe than sorry. And now snap the lid on. And these lids stay on so good. I mean, you can hear it snapping into place like that.
You just want to make sure that you go all the way around and make sure that it's level. If you don't do that, then it's not seated correctly.
Right. And right here, you see that? That's the release lever. You press that in, and you can peel that right off. Comes off super
because
easy.
Once it's on good, you're not getting it off.
Peeling it off. I was ready to get a screwdriver out one time, and I'm like, no, there's a secret. Yeah. Directions. I don't read them. So anyway, what are we going to do with this now?
We're going to let it sit.
Do you think we need to put this on a lipped tray?
I don't. Because this is semi-transparent, I can see that our volume comes up to here, meaning we have that much headspace. If this gets that excited in fermentation and bubbles up out through all that,
then we'll worry about it. I usually leave them sitting out for 24 to 48 hours until fermentation starts. One more thing I want to talk about is swirling. We used to do it all the time. I really don't do it that much anymore. Maybe in the first day or two, and that's about it. And usually I do it just because I feel like playing with my brew. That's really why. It doesn't necessarily make anything work better. We've had a few people that said, oh, I didn't swirl it and it stalled. Was it because I didn't swirl? No. I'm going to tell you right now, not swirling is not going to make a brew stall. It's just not going to. What it does is it might degas it slightly, get some of the CO2 out, and maybe help it just a teeny tiny bit. But if something's already struggling, it's probably not going to make the difference between a stall or not a stall. It's just not going to. So don't worry about it. You can just put it in a corner and walk away for a month, and it's all good. It doesn't really matter. You can just leave it. It's fine. It's fine.
See you in a week or so.
Okay, it's been 3 days. And, well, the airlock is evened out. It was kind of vigorous for a couple of days and then
it was
stopped.
Just bubbling away. The pressure poofed up the lid ever so slightly, which is a great indicator that it has a perfect seal. So now we're using our secret flap, which really isn't a secret. It's just how you open this particular bucket. And we're going to look inside.
Okay, so as you can tell, the fruit is floating to the surface. That kind of bothers me, and we may have to do something about that. but I want to take a reading on this and see where it's at because it's been 3 days. I mean, today's Thursday. We started it on Monday and it's ready to go. But if it's ready to go, we'd like to get this one moving because we're trying to get a bunch of videos done in a more timely manner because we're going to be going out of town.
Also, the holidays are going to be here before we know it, and we want to be able to drink this during the holidays.
Yeah. So let me just get a reading on this. It's very, very cloudy, which tells me this is still very, very young, and that's okay. There's still quite a bit more to do on this one.
The apples themselves are starting to give up their goodness, so there's little apple chunks floating around in there, which is completely normal.
I expected this went dry in just a few days. It's not totally dry. Well, that's interesting. It's at 1.020. That's kind of troublesome. It only moved 30 points.
I would be completely shocked and aghast, but we've had a lot of our brews lately just kind of take their sweet old time.
Yeah, it's not been on the apples long enough for the apples to
It's only
really
been
extract.
3 days.
Yeah, we were talking about adding the spices today if it was done, but I don't think I want to yet.
Okay.
Well, if it really is stalling, I don't want to add spices and make
Because it could retard it.
It could really make it worse. But I am going to give it a good mix. I'm just going to use the baster and mix this up. There's a lot of gases in here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lees. The fact that there's still gases coming out means it's totally fine to do this. I'm just stirring. I am not shaking or adding air. I'm not squeezing the baster.
We also want to make sure that those
fruit,
since they are floating on the top, get submerged, get rehydrated in case we're drying out. They had no signs.
Yeah, everything
that
looks
was an
fine.
issue.
It's only been 3 days anyway.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah. A little bit of degassing might help. Just trying to get that to go down. Now, it could also be that it was gassy and I got some solids in the must when I did the reading. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
But we're going to play it safe.
We can hear the gases just by his gentle swirl. It sounds like a freshly opened bottle of soda.
So I'll just give this a bit of a stir, and we're going to put the lid back on and put it back in the fermentation probably till Monday, our next recording day, and then we'll show you what to do then. It's been 4 days.
Just bubbled.
And it just bubbled.
We kept this available, if you will. We didn't put it in the thing, so that way we could degas it. Ah. And every time I went into the room, I would give it a little swirly swirl.
Oh, you did? I didn't even know that.
Because I want things to happen, and I wanted to keep that fruit cap nice and moist.
Basically, we're pushing this one a little. I don't recommend doing that, but we are going to be going to see Fermentis. They have some convention basically that we're going to in France, and I don't want it's in actually
it's in Belgium.
It's in Belgium. I'm sorry, we're flying to France, then going to Belgium. And I kind of wanted this to come out before we go. So it's a cider. It really shouldn't take that long. But let me show you what this looks like inside. Looks like a bunch of apples sitting on top of some juice.
It actually looks better than the first time we looked at it because I've been swirling it so often.
Yeah, I think there was more like yeast raft type stuff the first time we looked at it.
Yeah, and little apple particulates because the apples start to degrade. They're molecularly decomposing due to the fermentation process.
Yeah, that's pretty much what fermentation is. It's a decomposition process.
Yep.
So it started at 1.050. 4 days ago, it was 1.020. What is it today? Only one way to know.
Hopefully lower.
Yeah. Well, I have plans for it pretty much no matter what.
Yeah.
So
we're going to do the thing.
It looks a little clearer.
It does.
But we did still see airlock activity, which could just be degassing, but, you know, it's always good to check. Oh, that looks promising. It leveled out at 1.000.
Now, does that mean it's done fermenting? No, we would have to do another week's check to see that. But we're impatient. We're not going to do that.
That's right.
We don't recommend this method.
And we sanitized. Well, you can totally do this method. Here's the thing. We know we're probably going to pasteurize this at the end. So it's totally okay to move forward at this point. We can rack it off the fruit and everything like that. But I'm not going to rack it off the fruit yet because usually it takes a couple weeks for the fruit to fully impart their flavors.
Right. Also, we know this is still plenty of gassy, and we're not going to degas it on purpose until we put everything in there and put the lid and everything back on. Then we're going to give it a swirl just to push out any oxygen that may have gotten into there because we know that the gas fermentation of our liquid is more susceptible to CO2 than it is to oxygen. So because it's still degassing, we know there's CO2 in there. So oxygen more than likely is not going to get in there. The CO2 is going to say, I'm in here, get out.
Right. So we're not going to degas this today. But I want to point something out. Today is only 7 days old. Okay. That's why I say I want to leave that fruit in there for another week. But what do I mean by move forward? Well, this is supposed to be a spiced cider, right? All right, let's start with some spices. Cinnamon. We got the big boys today.
Yeah.
Now, before anybody asks, it just says ingredient cinnamon. I'm going to go with, this is probably cassia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hot. It smells hot. Came from the Asian market, okay? And normally I would maybe use half of one of these. Today, I'm going to use 2 of these. Why, you might ask? Well, remember that trip that I said we're going on? I want this to be done before we go. So I'm going to overload the spices in hopes to over-extract. Is it a little wasteful?
Yeah,
maybe.
But all this is going to go into our compost, so...
Yeah. So if you don't need to rush this, if you don't want to make this super fast, you can just use half of what we're using or the same amount and let it spice to your...
Can you remember all this, or do you want to take notes as you're doing it?
2 big boy cinnamon sticks. Allspice berries. My absolute favorite spice. Now...
It smells like Christmas. Just stick your nose in there. It smells like Christmas.
It really does. I'm going to use quite a bit. I normally only use like 10 or 12. This is probably like 2 tablespoons, I would say.
Do we want to... You don't even want to measure, do you? You don't even care.
No, I don't even care.
He's throwing caution to the wind, ladies and gentlemen.
Something I want to point out. Recipes like this are much to taste. Some people will like more, some people will like less. The trick to it is balance the amount that you add and then balance the time that they're in there. In other words, if I put a lot more allspice and not as much cinnamon, it's going to be very allspice heavy, and now I can't adjust it as easy. But I put in like way more cinnamon than I normally would, so I'm putting in way more allspice than I normally would too. Okay, does that make sense?
But now how are you going to mark that as to what you put in?
It's about 2 tablespoons.
All right.
I'm pretty good at that kind of thing.
This is true. Yes, annoyingly so.
Okay.
Next up is cardamom. These you want to crush.
Yep, I'm going to tear them a little bit with my...
Violence is the answer.
Yeah, if I can. Wow, these are tough ones.
Get angry, make a face.
I don't do that. I'm gonna cut it.
Do you want me to sanitize those?
Sanitize the scissors, please.
Ideally, you would want to use kitchen shears.
But they're way over there.
But they're way over there. We're lazy. And
so instead, we just sanitize it. And I'm gonna use 3 cardamon pods.
Don't cut your finger.
I'm just cutting them in half, like along the diameter, like that. That way the cider can get to it. And don't cut your finger.
Yeah,
it's just good advice in general.
Oh, it smells so good already.
It really does.
Now...
Cloves. These are whole cloves. And before somebody asks what kind of clove, they're cloves. It's a spice.
It's a spice.
They look like little spears, kind of.
They kind of look like jacks or
They kind of do.
Something.
So 3 and a piece came out. I'm going to go with 3 and a piece. You know what? No, I'm not. 2 and a piece. Clove is not my favorite flavor, but it does add nicely to this.
Super potent.
And it gets really, really strong, really, really fast. Somebody told me one time that they put 3 tablespoons of cloves into a 1-gallon batch. And they wanted to know, how can I remove that? And I said, you can't. You got to dilute that by about 20 to 1. That's the only way.
So if you get anything from this video at all, it's go light on the clove.
There was a little tiny piece, so like 2.5 cloves. That's it.
And that's over spiced, okay? We did stress that, right? Hopefully enough.
The idea behind this is I want this to extract all of its spices in about a week so that we can do our tasting before we leave. And I'm just giving this a gentle mix. I want those spices to get into the liquid. They do float. There's nothing you can do about that. But I'm trying to just get them all wet at least. There's a lot of gas coming out now. So as you can see, just stirring nice and gently, trying to just get everything kind of moist. We're not really degassing. We're not pushing anything around. We're not breaking up any of the fruit. Just a nice, gentle stir. part of the reason for the gentle stir is, see how much headspace we have? If we were to degas this fully, there's a lot of headspace there. There's a possibility that things could happen because that fruit is bulging out of the liquid. There's nothing we can do about
So
that.
speaking of that, we're going to put our lid back on. Now, this lid seals really good. But
As long as you do that.
to get that snap.
If it doesn't snap, didn't work. All around.
I was trying to think of something to rhyme with
I know.
snap. Right?
Bap.
If it doesn't snap, it ain't all that. I don't know.
Sure.
Doesn't rhyme at all. It's
Nope.
All right.
Okay.
So it should be flush, and now you can even see that the top is starting to bulge. That's
Yep.
because that's how much gas is in here.
But it probably is done fermenting. With all those spices put in, it's probably done fermenting because the spices have some antibiotic properties. They may stop fermentation, and that is okay because in the next step, we'll show you how we fix that. So, just need a semi-dryish spot on the lid
good.
where I can still see the airlock, and then I'm going to put my note.
Okay.
It's going to go back into fermentation, and we'll see you in a week. Okay, it's been 7 days. This has been sitting on easily double the amount of spice that I would normally add. So we're going to remove the lid, break the seal.
As you can tell, it's sealed quite nicely.
Yeah,
We've heard some
I
people
smell spice.
saying that they don't feel like these buckets seal properly. We have not
Yeah.
had that problem. What we've noticed, though, is that if you just put it on, it's not going to seal. You actually have to hear it snap.
If you don't hear that snap,
If you don't hear a snap,
yeah,
it didn't seal.
don't mean anything if it ain't got the thing.
That's
got
right.
that swing. All right, I need to show you what this looks like inside. So looking inside, I see absolutely nothing that would make me concerned. There's no mold, there's no weirdness, no nothing. In fact, it looks a little cleaner now than it did the last time we looked at it. I smell the spices.
It smells fantastic.
And that's important because here's the thing. In a normal circumstance, we would have used half the spices, let them sit until they extracted enough.
And we would take samples to make sure that it extracted
Right.
enough.
But in this case, we're leaving the country in a couple days, and we wanted this done. And every once in a while, somebody asks us, what can I make that's done in X amount of time? So we're trying to see, can we actually make this really good in a shorter amount of time? Just so you're aware, just being clear. So we're gonna rack this. A rack to a pitcher, and that leaves behind all the fruit and all the spices.
Do we need a barrier, or those are big enough pieces that we don't need to really about it,
I think
right?
we're good.
Okay.
I am gonna leave the cap on, but I'm just gonna try to go below the surface of that. Oh yeah, it's nice and clear underneath.
Okay.
Just get it started, and I'll just kind of hold it there. We'll see when this is done racking. All right, we racked it. We ended up with about 112 ounces of our 1 gallon batch, which we only did add 1 gallon of actual juice to this. So you lose a little.
Yeah.
It's a fact of life.
It becomes a little difficult when you have those big chunks of apples, because the apples like to deteriorate
fall
and cause problems when you're auto-siphoning.
They become applesauce in the bottom of your fermenter.
They do. So can you get more out of it? Possibly, but at the risk of oxygenation, it's kind of a give and take scenario. So
I did go a little deep though. That's why this is kind of cloudy. It was
Yeah.
actually quite clear when we first started. It's a little bit cloudy, but it's okay.
because we know
We have plans.
more stuff's coming.
So the next step,
So take a taste.
let's make it taste good. Because we have the basics. We have all the alcohol, we have the cider made, and we have the spices in there.
It smells fantastic. So if it tastes even similar, remotely adjacent to its aroma, it is going to be beautiful.
I think it's going to taste a little young, but that's to be expected. It's probably going to be a little bit harsh right now because it's 1.000. It's still unsweetened. But if you don't start with the base, you'll never be able to build it.
It's definitely appley, but it needs some sweetness.
Oh, yeah. Let me get some sugar. Be right back. Since this is cider, you could add more apple juice to it. But that would change things. It would dilute it and make things unusual. So instead, we're going to use sugar. Just plain old white sugar.
I'm definitely getting the apple flavor in this.
I got the spices at the end.
I don't feel like I need more apple. I just feel like I need more sweetness.
Right.
And sugar brings the sweetness without adjusting any of the other flavors.
Bring in the sweetness.
Bring in the sweetness.
And ideally, a mulled cider like this should be a little on the sweet side. I need something to mix that with.
Do you need the spattle?
I need the spattle.
What is a spattle? It's a spoon. It's a paddle. It's both. Get yours in the description below.
She totally took away my opportunity.
The first time I got to do that. I was really excited.
Took that away from me, though. I'm just joking. So I added a significant amount of sugar to this, and we're going to mix that up. Actually, you know what? If Derek can mix that up, I'm going to do some calculation for you. I'm going to use the calculator teacher said I would never have handy. It was right there in my pocket all along. And I'm going to calculate our approximate ABV. So we started at 1.050. We ended at 1.000. So you just subtract 1.050 minus 1.000, and you get 0.05 points used times 131.25 gives us about, well, it's, okay. The number comes up as 6.5625. I'm very sorry, but there's no way we're actually that accurate. It's more like somewhere between, say, 5 and 7-ish, something like that, because we are diluting it a little bit by adding some of this sugar. So I'm going to call it 6%.
Now, we are going to take another gravity reading after we're done with our flavor adjustments, but that gravity reading has nothing to do with considering what your ABV is.
Right.
So,
it's just sweetness level. It does slightly dilute the original, but I already kind of took that into account, unless I had like 3 pounds of sugar, which I don't plan to do. How you doing over there?
I think I am stirred.
All right, let's just do a check. You know how you check? You use a pitcher like this that you can see through. You look at the bottom.
There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. And you listen. I don't hear granules.
Nope.
All right, we're stirred. We're mixed. We have found this is the best way to test for sweetness levels because you can't over sweeten. You're adding just enough a little at a time, and if you over sweeten, it's because you dumped in half the bag. Don't do that. I think it needs more. It's good. It's actually quite nice. If this was carbonated and cold, it'd be beautiful exactly the way it is. If at this point you are not tasting enough spices, put spices back in, put it back in a fermenter, let it sit for another week or two.
I feel like your spice adjustment by adding more spices actually worked out really well.
It did. We got a nice bit of spice to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually pretty happy with that. Now you have to remember, spices are biological things, and they may be slightly different. Like your cinnamon might not extract as fast as ours did, or it might extract slower than ours did. That's why we do this step. If at this point you say, I'm not getting enough spice, add more spice.
The temperature of your environment, also the alcohol amount may differ a little bit than ours.
Oh, sure.
And those two parameters will drastically change how much the extraction time is.
I am actually afraid to go any sweeter because I think once that gets heated up, that's going to be lovely. That is really nice.
I think we're good.
I would drink this just right now as it is.
Absolutely. Let's take a final gravity reading so that way our viewers know how much we sweetened this by.
Exactly. Let me put this away. Okay, quick explanation of why we're going to take this reading. This is to give you a guide as to how sweet we made it. Because if I told you add 1 pound of sugar, it's not the same thing. Because we have exactly 112 ounces here. What if you have 120? What if you have 140? What if you have 90 ounces? If you add the same amount of sugar that we did, it's going to be a different sweetness level. So that's why we like to use the specific gravity reading, because that way it covers all the bases of all the volumes. And pretty much what I expected, we sweetened to 1.026. So it's sweet, which we expected mulled ciders are sweet? I gotta take a note. At this point, though, we do have something we have to do. Otherwise,
what is that, Brian?
It's pasteurized, because we're going to have a problem if we don't. And that problem will be it's going to ferment further, and we don't actually want that. Now, why will it ferment further? Here's why. It's because we used Safe Cider TF6, which is probably a 10 to 12% ABV cider yeast, okay? This is only about 6%. So we just added sugar to it. That's fermentable, which means it can go further. So it'll just ferment that all out quite happily and not care that we want a sweet cider. So if we rack this back to a fermenter and we pasteurize it at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius will be right here, for 22 minutes. Now that's important. It's internal temperature of 140, or the Celsius right here, for 22 minutes. I've heard a lot of people recently saying, oh, I did 140 degrees for like 15 minutes. That's not enough. You have to actually pasteurize. That will kill off, and I mean kill, the yeast. Completely dead. Kill the yeast, preventing further fermentation, and it stabilizes that brew at that exact sweetness level.
If you would like a full explanation of this pasteurization process, we have a full video on that, and I'll make sure to link it in the description below.
So for now, we're going to rack this back to a fermenter. We're going to go pasteurize it, and we'll see you probably in a couple of days for a tasting. It's been one day, and I would like to show you something.
There's a lot of sediment.
We pasteurized this, and that's what came out as it pasteurized. Let me show you a closer look. Yeah, that's the bottom of the fermenter, and that is a bunch of very loose, very wispy lees. And things like this just bother me a little bit. Plus, here's the other thing that worries me a little bit. That's a lot of headspace. So after we do this taste, we might actually have to rack this to a new container. Either that or we just have to finish it all in one sitting, which that's a lot of cider. So I don't think we're going to be doing that. And this one came out to like 7%, I think. Didn't we say that? I know I did the numbers before. I don't know. I'll put it up here, but it was something like that. So
now, I'm not too surprised that there's that much in there, because when you use real apples, they tend to just kind of fall apart. And so their little proteins and particulates are going to be...
I call them bits.
In there. And then pasteurization helps them not be in there. So that's what we got going on the bottom.
I'm going to get 2 squirts today.
2 squirts? Now, you might be wondering...
Maybe even 3 squirts.
Why are you putting them in these mugs? Well, remember...
This is hot cider.
That's right.
Not cold, not room temperature, not blood temperature. Hot.
So we're going to make it hot.
That's right. 3 squirts.
We're trying to remember if we've ever microwaved these particular mugs.
Nope.
So
we're going to find out real quick.
Hopefully this goes well.
If you really wanted to, you could put some in a pot on the stove and do it that way. But, you know, who has that kind of time? I will tell you, though, the spices are coming through. I can smell the spices right now. Now, of course, if you really want to, you can get all kinds of fancy. You can put, like, extra nutmeg over the top, or you can sprinkle ginger on it, or you can put cinnamon in there, or you can do all sorts of stuff. You can put another piece of fruit in there if you want to. But you know what? We're tasting this as we made it. So let me go nuke this stuff, and I'll be right back.
It's hot.
Yeah, so I did 2 minutes in the microwave, and our mugs survived.
It smells so
There's some steam.
good.
See the steam?
I see the steam. Oh. This is one of those things that just makes me really, really happy. And I know many people share this opinion. My love for hot mold things. I know Sarah, for example, loves the hot mold things. So this is to you, Sarah.
Now, I'm going to say this is still slightly cloudy. It's not perfectly clear, okay?
And I'm going to stick to my guns.
But I don't care.
About cloudy cider.
Here's how I feel about cloudy cider. I think, in my opinion, it may keep something from being a 10 or an 11 if it should be a 10 or an 11 otherwise. But if it's already below that in my head, it doesn't hurt it at all.
For some reason...
Sounds weird, but that's...
In my head, if a cider is cloudy, that means quality.
Yeah, cider is almost the exception to that. So, yeah, forget everything that I just said. Doesn't really matter.
Like, I want to give it more points because it's
Don't
cloudy.
do that.
I don't know.
But we did the test with bentonite and sparkleoid. We haven't done any other clearing agents, and we know that it does take away some flavors. So
Yeah, we still got to do a pectin test.
yeah, we do.
Pectic enzyme.
What I'm smelling on this, though, it kind of smells like apple pie.
It does. I just want to take a bath in this.
Now, we did sweeten this up to 1.026, so this is going to be on the sweet side, and then we pasteurized it. That's why all that stuff fell out. I'm going in.
Is it going to be too hot? Am I going to hurt myself? I don't know.
It's just hot enough.
Just hot enough? Okay.
Just sip it. Don't, like, slurp and guzzle, you know? It's almost the hurt you temperature, but not quite.
It's lovely.
It's really nice. That definitely has all the lovely spices from like an apple pie or a pumpkin spice kind of thing with the apple flavor comes through.
Did we back sweeten this?
Yes, we did. We added sugar.
Huh.
Up to 1026, like I just said that just before you tasted
I was still smelling and having a good time over here.
Yeah, so this is basically just a bunch of apples, some apple juice, Go Firm, Fermento, some pectic enzyme. There's pectic enzyme in here already. And we did use some potassium bicarbonate to take the acidity level up because it was too acidic.
Yep.
And then we added cinnamon, allspice, cardamom, and clove. Added some sugar to sweeten it, and there you have it. Very simple.
This is fantastic.
Yeah, this is actually really, really good. Something I'd like to point out as well. Today is November 26th. This was started on November 11th. That means today, this is 15 days old. I think that is the youngest brew, quickest time ever for a brew to finish like that. This is fabulous. This is great.
I think the only thing...
The raspberry hydromel was pretty quick too, though. But anyway, the only thing that
I would potentially change or that's coming to mind to add or augment I think I would want to back sweeten it with honey. I wouldn't want to ferment with honey. I don't want this to be a cider.
I thought about that when we were doing this yesterday.
Yeah.
When we did the sweetening, I was like, I wonder if we should add honey.
Or even brown sugar.
Could do that too. See, there's options.
Yeah.
This is the very basic, simple route. Could have gone a little more extravagant. You can also, if you wanted to, add some honey to your glass or add some brown sugar to your glass.
I'm thinking honey. I'm thinking honey's what.
But if you put this into a pot, throw in like a couple orange slices and lemon slices and another cinnamon stick and add some honey to it and things like that.
Then
you make this into...
You'll just be making another mold thing. But this is pre-mold.
That was the idea. This does not need that. But you could. You could make it into something truly different and unique. The spices, actually, I don't think you need more.
This is lovely.
Yeah. That came out really, really nice.
Good job, babe.
Thanks. Because she looked at me a little funny when I was suggesting
Yeah, I
this.
was like, we're going to do this thing. And I'm like, what?
Why? I don't understand. And when I explained...
This is why. This is why.
Because I knew it's something that she would like, too. And it is like literally 7%, which is no slouch. I mean, that's a decent amount of alcohol. Now, heating it up does... A little bit of the alcohol will boil away. Doing it in the microwave, probably very minimal. Doing it in a pot on the stove, if you left it there for hours, you might have a significant amount gone, but in just a few minutes, not that much is going to go away. Contrary to popular belief, alcohol doesn't boil off quite so easily.
Yeah. There's also the dilution factor that the water is going to boil off first. Does that help?
There's a lot of things to it. I'm not getting into it, because every time I do, somebody wants to argue with me about it.
No, sir.
Yeah.
I talked to a chemist, sorry.
Yeah. Anyway... So now it's time for scoring. And the way we score now, we went back to ye olde system, which is just a 1 through 10 number with the occasional 11. And I like to break it into like 3 sections, if you will. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But it's not really the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's more like the good, the okay, and the bad. Yeah, kind of. Sure. So 1 through about 4 is the bad. Probably not something I would ever want to drink. And if it was bad enough, I might dump it out. I mean, it might just be the kind of thing that I would not want at all in my house. Like, if I'm never going to drink it, and you're never going to drink it, and nobody wants it, and it's just... Ugh,
you're out of here.
Dump it. We need the bottles. Then you have the next category, which is above 4 to in the 7-ish range. Those are the ones that are, this is pretty good. It's drinkable. I might not love it, but I'd drink it, and if someone poured it for me, I wouldn't be offended, and I might even go back for seconds, okay? That's that range. Then above that, like above, 7 and above-ish, all the way to the illustrious 11, these are the superior ones. This is where this is really good. I would reach for this. I think about this when I'm sleeping. This is a good one. That's the kind of thing we're talking about with that range. So think of it more in the ranges than more in the actual scores. And just think of those scores as within that range. In other words, like a 7 is kind of just in the superior category, whereas a 6 is at the top of the, I'd drink it category. Kind of like that, you know what I mean? Don't take the scores too seriously, because this is much like Whose Line Is It Anyway? The scores are made up and the points just don't matter. I don't know if that's what Drew Carey actually says, but that's how I'm going to say it. I don't know if I can score this one yet. I mean, the flavor combo's coming in. It's like just a really good cider to begin with. It's got a lot of like nice apple flavor to it. There's a little bit of the tartness of the apple is there, but there's the sweetness as well of the apple. That's from using Honeycrisp and Granny Smith apples. We got both sides of that.
The combo really
combined with the juice
does elevate this.
Yeah. And I like that idea of using apples anytime we make a juice cider. It adds that extra element, a little bit more complexity, and a little bit more fresh fruit flavor to it.
The juicy fruit type
it just
thing.
seems to work really, really well. So I'm getting that nice sweet tart apple flavor, but with all those spices on it, it really does remind me of like drinking apple pie. I mean, and obviously she hated it. So yeah, I'm really pleased with this. I think the flavor combo works incredibly well. I have a score.
I do too. I don't know if it's the right one though.
I know what I'm doing. You ready?
All right.
1, 2, 3, 10.
9.5.
That was the last minute. I was at 9 or 9.5, and I started thinking about it, and I said, you know what?
This is really good.
Does the clarity really ruin it for me? No, not at all.
No.
I don't think the clarity even comes into play.
The only reason why I knocked mine to a 9.5,
Because you felt guilty giving it a 10.
No, is because that thought of, would this be better back sweetened with honey? And that
maybe
it's a question mark. It's not even a yes. It's a maybe.
I think it'd just be a different beverage.
So I couldn't deduct it a full point. I just.
But
said
is that
half
this
a point.
beverage's fault that we didn't sweeten it with honey, or is it just another way of doing it?
It could possibly just be another way of doing it.
And that's why I didn't deduct
Maybe
for
it
something
needs
like
to
that.
be a hot, spiced, hard cider.
That's something else we could work on.
And the reason why I said back sweetening it with honey rather than fermenting with honey is I don't want that bitter note that sometimes occurs when you ferment honey. I just wanted the honey note without the fermented honey note. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we actually tested that too. Like, can you make an expensive, cheap honey where you use an exotic honey to back sweeten just a standard honey? And it actually works out really well in a mead. So I can't see why it wouldn't work for a wine or a cider. People do it all the time, actually.
Right.
Get people to tell me that.
So I encourage you to make this recipe. I encourage you to play with this recipe and tweak it to
It's
your
a nice
own
base
preferences.
that you can make whatever you want.
Maybe you want to mix the fruit up. Maybe it's a cran apple. That might be nice, right? Or a pomegranate apple might be nice.
You can mix all kinds of fruits in there.
And like Brian said, you can even add those after and just use this as a base, which might be fun. And you can even spike this with additional spirits, if you will,
Totally do that too.
for the season.
Apple brandy would work really nice, actually. Yeah. Anyway, I think this came out wonderful. I think you should make it. It only takes 2 weeks. You got 2 weeks before Christmas, so go ahead and start it. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.